Yep. Give me a nod when you're ready.
Like fourth.
Shooter's ready. Stand by.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Bullets and Bourbon. I'm Frank Gow, joined by my co-host Matt Gunlock. Today's guest is Russell Fortney. He is the Area 8 Director for USPSA. He is on the board of directors. He got elected the summer of 23, currently serving that position. Ran into Russ because as soon as I moved up here to Virginia, whenever I traveled with the shooting team, it didn't matter which match we were at, whether we're in Florida or Texas, it seemed that Russ was always there. Staffing the match, working as a range master, driving around in the golf cart, delivering Perrier and like other goodies to the shooters. So, I mean, we've worked many matches together. He's very influential in this area, puts his heart and soul into putting on good matches. His home club is York Practical Shooters. I've yet to go up there and shoot as local, but I would definitely like to. At this time, Russ, you want to give us a little bit of an introduction and just maybe hit on some areas that I didn't cover?
Sure. So I joined USPSA in 2003. I was sort of just a regular local shooter. I'd shoot a couple of major matches a year up until probably 2015 or so. I became an RO very soon after that. And I worked all the sort of major matches in the area, section matches and area matches. It was pretty standard for me to work a few matches a year. Up until about 2015. And then I don't know how familiar you guys are with the cycle, the USPSA cycle, but, you know, everybody joins and you want to be great. You pick a hero. When I joined, it was Dave Savigny. He was the top guy in production, and I was shooting production. So he's the guy that I looked up to a lot. But, you know, I didn't have the ability or the patience or the desire to practice. So, of course, you know, I didn't reach anywhere near his levels. And then eventually I started to kind of get burned out just because I wasn't getting any better. I never practiced. So, the expectation to get better was kind of silly. But it sort of became less fun than it was originally. And that was probably around 2017 or 18 when I started feeling that way. And that's when the club that I'm a member of up at York, they started talking about bringing back USPSA. They had run it for a number of years, you know, from the time I joined USPSA until about 2013, when they stopped running USPSA matches. So some of the members started talking about bringing back USPSA, and they were looking for somebody to be a match director. And I'd never been a match director for any sort of match, a level 1 or level 2 or level 3 or anything like that. I'd worked a number of matches as an RO, but never as a match director or anything. So when they were looking for people, and since I thought it'd be a good time to try something new for myself, I decided to give it a shot. So I took on the role of match director. Recruited an assistant match director, and we ran our first match in late 2018. We ran a sort of an outlaw match just to see if we could attract people to the match. And, you know, we got a really good turnout for that match. And, you know, it was super cold out and we still got a good turnout. So we decided to reaffiliate the club, and we started running matches in 2019. And I really enjoyed doing it. Starting in 2019, we run once a month during the warmer months, something like March through October. And I found something new that I really like doing it within USPSA, and that is, you know, running a match and, you know, all the stuff that you like about USPSA that people talk about when they join USPSA and why they immediately loved it. And that is, you know, the people. So when you run, as you know, Frank, when you run a match, you're constantly interacting with the people, even more so than when you go to a match as a shooter. So the interaction, the community stuff, the camaraderie and stuff, all that stuff is amplified when you're a match director. So I kept doing it. And around the same time is when I decided to try to become a range master. And I think I signed up for 2019. So I was doing both of those at the same time. And that also, they both gave me something new to try. So, it really allowed me to begin to enjoy USPSA a lot more again. Whereas, around 15 through 18, I was sort of in a dip, not feeling great about it. I was still doing it all the time, but it just wasn't as fun as it used to be. And those two things, running the match and then going through the range master program, and I started working the nationals matches around then too. It really, I really started to enjoy it a lot more again. So I've been doing that since 19, working matches all over the country. And it really did allow me to, it sort of reinvigorated me to USPSA. And I'm glad I did all of those things.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that story with us. I would say that my primary interface with you when I start shooting with the team is you as a range master, because you were at so many of the locals in the Area A region, so many of the majors in the region. But let's talk local matches for a bit. So your relationship with local matches has changed from being a shooter to match director, and then now range master and area director. Are there particular local matches that you always try to make time for?
Well, it's funny. First of all, we're blessed in this area, the Mid-Atlantic region of the East Coast. I'm sure you're aware of this. If you wanted to shoot 8 different local matches a month, you could. So every Saturday and Sunday, you could shoot a different match. And some of those days, you'd have to choose which match you're going to go to because there are multiple matches being run at the same time. So I did that a lot for a long time. I shot local matches every single weekend during the summer months. But in 19, when I started with the range master program, and then I started traveling a lot more to major matches, that took me out of the area a lot. So I unfortunately, I miss a lot of the local matches now. I'm usually home for the third weekend. That's my match, which is a Sunday. The Saturday before my match, the West Shore Practical Shooters, they run a match, and they're just 30 minutes from York. So it's very convenient for me we usually set up York on a Friday. We don't always finish, so oftentimes I'll go to the West Shore match on Saturday. I'll stop at York on the way home and finish up anything that needs to be done, and then we'll shoot on Sunday at York. So York and West Shore, I almost always go to those two matches. But we're very lucky in this area that when I am home, there are lots of great matches to go to. You guys at Quantico doing a great job. Tim really helped turn things around, and now you guys have picked that up and you keep it going. Antolani, I don't know if you've ever been to a local match at Antolani, but they set up a 10 states match every month. So they're basically running a section match every month up there for $25. They do a great job. Kiana's doing a great job at Thermont. Anne Arundel Practical Shooters, the club you're trying to join. It's a tiny club with 3 bays. But they do a really good job, and it's a different experience when you go there. In the old days, I used to like to shoot as many stages as possible. So the bigger the match, the better for me. Now that I'm older and a lot more decrepit, I don't mind going to a small match at Anne Arundel because they're limited by a consent decree on the weekend hours, so that they can only shoot between 10 and 1. So the match starts at 10 promptly, and if you're not done shooting at 1, well, you're done shooting at 1 because of the consent decree. So that's a small match, typically 3 or 4 stages. But it's nice. You go shoot a few stages, then everybody goes to lunch. So I like going there, and that has the benefit of being only about 15 minutes from my house. So I really like that club too. How about you? You got any local favorites?
Well, I got a quick question for you. What do you use to determine your metric for distance traveling to locals? I used to go about 2.5, sometimes 3. Now I'm willing for 3-gun to go about 4.5 hours for a local. But that's like special case, like if the match is worth it. What is your gauge for travel to locals?
That's about what mine is. I don't mind. I like driving a lot. So I've driven 100,000 miles in the past 2 years, just going to matches. I didn't drive to work at all during those 2 years because we were working at home. So I don't mind driving 3 hours for a good local match. Antolani is a little less than 3 hours for me, but if I'm home and I'm not going somewhere else, that's a match I definitely drive 3 hours for. in the old days, I used to drive down to Sir Walter in North Carolina for their level 1 matches, and that was about 4 hours away. I'm probably not that hardcore anymore, just because, you know, you got to get up so early and leave early, and then you're getting back late in the day, so it just occupies too much of a day. But yeah, probably 3 hours. I don't mind driving 3 hours to a good level 1 match.
To answer your question, Sir Walter is that match for me. That's about 3.5 hours from where I am now. I made that trip last weekend, since this last weekend we were doing a match at Quantico, and I won't do it every single month, but if it so happens that the wife is working and then I'm available, yeah, absolutely, I'll make that drive. When we were stationed in Lejeune, that was like the closest quality match, and it was still 3.5 hours because of the back roads and all that. Yeah, I mean, I was going to get to it next, but obviously you do a lot of driving. It seems like you drive to all these major matches. Is there a particular major match that you found most rewarding in terms of all the time you spent on the road? And then I guess on the road trip side, is there a road trip that you've enjoyed the most?
Yeah, so in 2021, I got the idea in 2020 that I wanted to work all of the area matches the next year, so 2021. And I registered for all of them. It was actually hard to get into 2 of them, Area 1 and Area 7, where they already had so many staff they didn't need me. So then I said, well, I'll just go and shoot those matches. So I registered to shoot those matches. So I was going to go to them all. And then things happened. I guess people dropped out. So that eventually I was able to work both of those matches. So in 2021, that was a pretty good experience, going to all of the area matches and working them all as staff. And 2 of those trips in particular were pretty nice. And that one trip was Area 3 and Area 1 together. So I drove to Nebraska for the Area 3 match. The next weekend was the Area 1 match. So right after we were done shooting on Sunday, I hit the road for Seattle. Got into Seattle in time to, I think the day before the staff match started. So I was there for a few days, and then took the really long drive home, 40 hours of driving to get home from Seattle. That was a cool road trip, though. I enjoyed that. I think probably the best trip of that year, and to date, maybe my best trip, my most favorite trip, was Area 2 that year. So 2021, I'd been a USPSA member for 18 years. I always wanted to go to Area 2. Never made it out there. Could never convince anybody to go with me. So I got into Area 2 to staff, and so that trip was drove out to the match, get out to Area 2. I just love the West. I think the West it's a beautiful part of the country, so I enjoyed that part of it. And then shooting the match at Rio Salado. Of course, I consider Rio to be the mecca of practical shooting. So that was very enjoyable, shooting the match, meeting a lot of the people out there. And then afterwards, I went to the Grand Canyon, which I'd never been to the Grand Canyon. So that was really nice. And then on the way home, I don't know if you ever heard of this place, but there's a restaurant in Texas called the Big Texan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they got a Texas shaped pool. We stayed there. Yeah.
Yeah. So they all along I-20, on the way to Amarillo, you see these signs for the Big Texan and the free 72-ounce steak meal. And I've always wanted to try that meal. I watch these YouTube channels where people do competitive eating, and I'm nowhere near on the level of the people who have YouTube channels, but once in a while I try some of these eating challenges, and I always wanted to try that 72-ounce steak challenge. So I did try it. I actually did it. I completed it within the time limit. So I did that meal, and that was quite an accomplishment too. So overall, that was a really good trip. That 2021 Area 2 trip, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, dude, that's a grandmaster level feat on the eating challenge.
It was
72 ounces of steak.
It was.
Did they throw? They always try to throw sides in there too, like potatoes and other stuff to kind of trip you up. Did they do that, or was it just steak?
Yeah. It's not just the steak. It's a whole meal. You have to eat the whole meal. So it's a steak, a dinner roll, a salad, 3 coconut shrimp, a breaded shrimp, and a baked potato. So you have to eat all that in 1 hour.
Damn. Yeah, I have been to that restaurant and hotel. It's pretty cool establishment. I don't know about eating that much steak though. I love steak, but I don't know about quite that much.
Well, one funny thing about it, if you go in there, if you do the challenge, you have to do it on a stage. So, everybody in the restaurant is looking at you. And I didn't really want to do it because I wasn't sure I could finish. So I asked the waitress, I was sitting at a regular table. I was like, can I just buy that steak, that you use in the challenge? I just want to see if I can eat the steak, my own personal challenge. And she said, sure, it's $200 for the steak. Said, well, how much is the challenge? And it was $72 for the challenge. You pay up front, and if you finish it, they give you your money back. So I said, well, I'll try the challenge on the stage. And I was lucky enough to finish it.
Damn. So, okay. Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I've been to that spot.
How much time did you have to spare?
Probably about 10, 15 minutes, something like that. I didn't start eating it right away. I wanted to cut up the steak first because these eating challenges, you don't want to do it slowly. You want to just force feed it. So I cut it up a lot before I started eating it. So I probably didn't start eating until about the 10-minute mark. And I finished somewhere around the 50-minute mark. They're really good people, the super good competitive eaters. There's a woman who has a YouTube channel. She did I think she did 3 of them in 20 minutes, like 3 complete meals in 20 minutes. So,
Nope.
I'm not on that level. I'm just a regular big appetite guy.
Geez, that's super impressive. You mentioned, having road trip companions. Who has been like the person that's kind of road trip with you the most? And then spending all that time on the road. Like Matt and I are big podcast people. Some people do stand-up comedy. Some people have playlists that go on forever. How do you pass the time?
Well, as far as the companions, I used to, when I first started, I started USPSA with friends, and we would travel around together. And then as people drop out, a lot of people dropped out, and then new friends come in, you make new friends, and you end up going to the same places with them. So over the years, I had, a few different traveling groups that we would go with. But probably for the past 5 years or so, I've done all this driving by myself. So I just drive everywhere alone. And I drive because, I'm on my own schedule. I know I'm not going to miss a flight. I know the airline's not going to lose my luggage or my gun. And I can also see the country if I drive. So one of the big things I wanted to do was start seeing the United States. So I've done a lot of that over the past 5 years. So I've seen a huge part of this country. So now I do all my driving by myself, basically. And what do I do when I'm driving 40 hours? Well, I listen to a lot of books and a lot of podcasts. I never listened to this podcast. I didn't know it existed before. And I actually don't listen to too many shooting podcasts. I listen to, different kinds of podcasts, economics, history, things like that.
The same way. I there are times I will listen to shooting. Most of the time it's history.
Yeah, I'm big into that kind of stuff too. So most of the books that I read or listen to, they're nonfiction. I'm not a big fiction person. So any kind of nonfiction book, I can usually get interested in that.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. So the whole reason that we wanted to bring you on today, Russ, and just for context, so everyone else knows, I sent an email to Russ around the time that Frank Rizzi got removed as the Area 7 director, and I expressed some of my concerns with the way that USPSA as an organization was going. And we ended up talking back and forth, and I just asked him, like, hey, would you like to talk about this on an episode? And he agreed, and here we are. So the next series of questions, as much as we would love to have you back on at some point, Russ, and just talk more about your time with USPSA and seeing the country and like what makes matches work and what makes USPSA competitors so unique and so much fun to be around. This episode is mostly dedicated to some recent events, some of which have already changed since we wrote the questions. So to start off, and this has already changed, but I saw that at some point USPSA was working to trademark the term hit factor. Philosophically, do you see USPSA as a top-down organization where possession of the rules and the mechanisms that enable matches reside within the board and the employees of USPSA? Or is it more of a democratized arrangement where local clubs and shooters enable the club to have its level of reach and prevalence in the competitive shooting scene compared to all these other disciplines?
Yeah, well, first of all, the trademark issue, that was, a lot of the things that I've heard. I don't spend a lot of time on social media myself, but I have a lot of friends and they'll constantly send me things. So a lot of the commentary apparently has been that this was some sort of an effort to punish some of the protesting clubs. And I don't think that's the case. Now, I was not personally involved in the decision to try and trademark Hit Factor. But apparently it has a pretty long history. So it's not like that idea just came to being recently. It's apparently been around for about 7 years where they've been talking about trying to do that. And they, various presidencies and boards have discussed it. And it finally sort of went through recently. I don't even know when exactly it was filed. But it was somewhat recent. And I don't think anybody on the board was involved in sending the application on. I didn't even know about it until some of the social media stuff happened. So that's just as a starter there. That I don't think the board members were aware that it was filed, and I don't think it was an effort to punish any of the clubs either, because the idea is at least 6 or 7 years old, or the idea to do it is about that old. So now your other question, obviously USPSA it's a combination of the headquarters group, the board, and the level 1 matches. So the organization itself exists. If you read the founding documents, it exists to promote practical shooting and practical shooting competition specifically. But I don't know, somewhere on the order of 98% of all USPSA matches that take place are level 1 matches that really headquarters has nothing to do with. They're run by volunteers on the local level, and really nobody from USPSA headquarters or the board is involved in running these matches. You run one, I run one. And you really need both parts of that equation in order to have a healthy organization, right? So if the headquarters and the board is in a bad way, doing the wrong things, that's going to affect sort of the organization in one way. If the clubs are doing bad things, not following the rules, doing things badly, that's going to affect the organization in another way. So in my mind, you need both sides of that. You need the local people, the level 1 matches, the local matches, and you need headquarters as an organizing structure. Without the structure, I think you'd probably end up with something like 3-gun, which has never been organized as far as I know. And I'm not a 3-gun expert, but it appears that 3-gun, for as long as I've been involved in shooting, 3-gun has been a very sort of disparate group where different matches are run all over the country using different rules, different equipment, things like that. So I think if you want to have a healthy USPSA organization, you need to have headquarters and the board doing the right things, and you need to have the clubs on the local level doing the right things and sort of working together.
Just to quickly clarify, at one point, 3-gun was somewhat organized. It was back in between, I want to say, well, whatever I got involved, 2013, you had 3-gun Nation. I think they came around a little bit before that. And then they basically were gone probably around 2018, 2019. And it kind of got to the point where they got so large, and a lot of like 2016, 17, they forgot what the purpose was. And this is completely my opinion. But they forgot about the shooters, and they focused more on the organization, and it just completely fell apart. Like, they were charging sponsors a ton of money. Like, sponsors weren't getting a return on investment. And, there was a lot going on at the time. I'm not going to go in full details, but it essentially just fizzled out and died. And that's why a lot of 3-gunners prefer the outlaw type matches, because each part of the country offers something different. But it's not to say that three-gun, multi-gun can't go back to being under an organization where there's a unified rule set. It's just getting
I get it.
Board.
But even when Three Gun Nation existed, weren't there still
there were still
the one-off matches? Yeah.
There were a lot of outlaw matches. It gives people different matches to choose from.
No, I totally understand that. And there's even a certain draw to that, probably, maybe particularly with Three Gun. But in my experience with sort of pistol matches and, beyond USPSA, I've done IDPA, I've done like bowling pin matches and falling steel matches. And the one thing I notice is that you really never know what rules you're going to get when you show up at a club, if you're not familiar with the club. Now, if you go there all the time, sure, you know their rules. But one of the huge benefits I see with USPSA is, you can go to a USPSA match anywhere in the country, and as long as they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you know exactly what the rules are going to be. So you know what you can do and what you can't do. Where can you holster your gun, things like that. So I think it's a big benefit of USPSA that we have so many clubs, 500 clubs, 500 USPSA clubs in the country. And you can go to any of them. So if you're going on vacation somewhere in a different state and you want to take your gun and shoot a match, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. So I do like that about USPSA. I think it's one of the big draws of USPSA.
Yeah, and I think the organization has put a lot of work into getting that level of standardization. It's like McDonald's, right? You pretty much know what you're getting into, and
yeah, exactly.
You expect a certain level of quality. But when I reached out to you after Frank had been removed, I mentioned that I was considering turning Quantico into a hit factor match, effectively transitioning into an outlaw match with the intent of stopping per match weekend. This last weekend, I submitted about $285 in activity fees to the USPSA organization. Just having run a classifier and having run roughly, I had over 107 shooters this last weekend. So that happens on a monthly basis if you're running matches, and then there's an affiliation fee. But I felt like what I was seeing, I was unwilling to continue to participate in the organization, continue to fund. Anyway, a lot of clubs are protesting in the form of converting from USPSA affiliated to hit factor matches. How are these protests affecting the conversations that you guys are having at the board?
Well, they don't. I mean, to be honest with you, the board, we don't meet. When we meet, about it. It's got to be a real meeting. It's got to be recorded. You'll see minutes. So we're actually not allowed to have meetings that you're not going to know about. So a lot of the conversations that we have, you see them now. Now you see them now that they're sort of live streamed. There's some communication, back and forth with email, obviously. I don't know exactly. I can't give you a number on, how the protests are actually affecting the organization. I can't say for sure. My guess is, based on looking at some numbers, and just this is like a 1 month look of 23 and 24. It looks like maybe it had about a 20% effect, which is pretty big. But it's winter. Especially in my area, hardly anybody's running matches. I know you do. You guys are tough. But a lot of people are like me. We're not tough. So we're not running matches when it's cold. And I don't know. I suppose maybe because I only looked at 1 year, I looked at one sort of data set from January 23 to January 24. Maybe there's other reasons why those numbers are down. Maybe it's, weather hit a couple areas particularly hard this year. That's hard to say. My guess is, the protests have had an effect. And it's sort of a big enough effect where if the 20% reduction was because of the protests, that's pretty big. It's sizable, and the organization will feel it for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so some of these clubs are taking a stand. Some sections have also peeled off as well. What, in your mind, is your ideal reconciliation between the organization and the protesters? And how do you envision USPSA and some of these clubs getting there?
Frank, I don't really know. I don't know the optimal way to deal with this situation. One thing I really respected about the way you reached out to me was it was a real conversation. It wasn't an attack. You didn't reach out and immediately attack me. And so I did appreciate that. So that's one of the reasons why I was willing to talk with you guys. I didn't know anything about your podcast. I didn't even look. So I don't know what kind of podcast you guys normally have. But because you approached me in such a respectable way, I thought it'd be nice if I could show you the same respect and come on to your podcast. So I don't know the best way to handle this, Frank. It's a sort of an unprecedented situation. Times are different now. I suspect that for the entire time I've been in USPSA, there have been pockets of people who have been sort of not happy with things that the organization has done. But 20 years ago, you told 5 people, and that was kind of the end of it. You went to a match and you talked about it with some people in your squad, and that was the end of it. Now, with so many people having a voice on social media, everything seems to be amplified. I don't even really know the extent of the sort of anger with the organization right now because everything is amplified on social media. And I think part of the protest now is, they're actually organizing to protest. So that's pushing the numbers higher. So we get a lot of emails, but this is a concerted effort to get people to do this. I don't know that all of these people are really angry with the organization. I assume some of them are really angry, but I assume others are just, participating in the protest because somebody asked them to. The other part of that is, even if the board decided to do whatever it is the protesters want, and to be frank with you, I don't know even what they want. I know some things, obviously, you mentioned a couple of things, but I don't know what it would take to satisfy the protesters 100%. And even if we did that, if the board did that, there are definitely people who don't agree with the protesters. So I don't think you're ever going to make everybody happy in an organization of 40,000 people. I think obviously the board can do some things better. The organization can do some things better. But by and large, in my mind, USPSA is doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to put on nationals. Well, they put on nationals. It's supposed to provide a rule set. It does that. We review the rules annually. We just went through a rules review. We have a classification system. Is it perfect? I don't think so. But we do have it, and nominally it's pretty good. If you look at the results of any match, it kind of goes by the classifications in order. So it seems to work at least a little bit. So I don't really know what the protesters want. So it's hard for me to say, like, how do we reconcile this? I know people are angry. And in some cases, I think they're not going to be not angry until they're in power, perhaps. So let me ask you, Frank, what do you want? What do you guys want from the protests? What do you want to see happen? What do you want the organization to do that it's currently not doing?
So restoring Frank was a step in the right direction. I would say, if I could articulate one particular point that's been particularly concerning to me, and this kind of leads us into our next question, is over the last year, we have seen a lot of cases where employees of the board have used the bylaws to remove elected officials. And I understand that, yes, technically those were correct removals. However, as an American, as a service member, as a leader myself, I have significant concern with using those mechanisms in what really seemed like political maneuvering in some cases. to remove, in one case, the president, in other cases, area directors that people had elected to represent them. It just seems like an undue balance of power. So you mentioned, there's a level of vitriol on the internet. And yeah, sometimes I got to mute it because it's just too much, right? Like some people legitimately, it's like a mosh pit, right? Some people are in the mosh pit to legitimately hurt somebody else. And usually they do a good job of just weeding that person out. But I would say that the frustration and the resentment definitely bubbled over as soon as people realized that Frank was being removed. It happened a little bit after Scott was being removed. I know that that's something we're going to talk about down the line. But that's really my largest concern, and what I'm seeing from other people, the people I'm talking to at my club level, just within my region. Like the fact that those things are happening is what spurred us to want to even have this conversation in the first place.
Okay. I see your point. And I think you've got to look at each of those situations individually. I don't think it's the right way to look at it, to look back now and say, well, 3 people have been removed. I think you have to look at each one individually and decide if it was legitimate or not. And I think a couple of the cases are kind of close calls. I don't think one of them is a close call. And in that case, I mean, what would you want the board to do if there's another case that's not a close call? Do we say, well, we have to overlook it now because there's a lot of anger currently? Or do you do what the bylaws tell you to do? So another thing that you have to consider is, the situation with the Area 4 director, Mel Rodero, where he didn't have his RO certification when he took office on January 1st of last year. The board, and this was even before I was on the board, and then it continued after I was on the board got hammered over not following the bylaws. So in my mind, a lot of this anger about the removals is sort of because who it affected. So ask yourself if Leighton gets a lot of hate his way. Ask yourself if Leighton had been the one who had a lapse in his membership, and he was removed from the board for it. Do you think you'd see the same level of anger from the social media crowd over the removal of a board member? Actually, I don't think you would. I think it would have been handled differently.
Yes. However, I also, that is the last board member I would have seen that happening to, simply because based on my perceptions, Leighton seems like one of the more influential members of the board. I guess going back to talking about removing elected officials, it was just inconsistent, right? Because in one case, right, something happens with Yemen and he gets reelected. He gets removed, by a mechanism enforced by DNROI. Mel is allowed to stay on the board. We have Scott removed. We have Frank removed. I agree with you that personally, these may seem like contradictory statements. As elected officials, I think it's simultaneously keeping your finger on the pulse of the organization, listening to your constituency, but also, I think a healthy organization needs to listen to his bylaws. But really, it's been difficult, and you definitely know things that I don't see. Just getting information from the sources that I am getting from on social media with a grain of salt, it just has looked incredibly inconsistent. I think that is another one of my major concerns.
Yeah, I understand that, but in my own defense, I was not on the board when the Mel situation was handled. Now,
right, absolutely, yeah.
So, but it was a unanimous decision by the current board. So I don't want to look back and criticize that board for what they did in Mel's case. And maybe it was warranted, maybe it's not. He had a personal situation that the board dealt with in the way they dealt with it. But nevertheless, after it happened, the board got absolutely hammered over that decision to not follow the bylaws. So I come into office in July, And that's what I see and I hear. I constantly hear this, that the board didn't follow the bylaw. So we attended the members meeting after the Handgun Nationals in Ohio. And, one of the things somebody asked me at this meeting was, do you think the board followed the bylaws with regard to Mel? And, again, I said, look, I wasn't on the board. I don't know exactly what the conversations were, so I don't know exactly why they did what they did. But from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't look like they followed the bylaws. So I'm sort of a new member to the board. I'm getting hammered myself for the board not following the bylaws, even though I wasn't part of that decision. And then we have another situation with a board member who it appeared he should not have been a candidate in that election. Now it's easy to say, well, the election happened a year ago. Let's just let it go. And actually, that was my initial inclination to do that, to sort of ignore this. But a couple of things are worth thinking about. Number one, he had an opponent in that election. It was a close election. Should we just ignore it and say, well, those people who voted for Frank's opponent, they don't deserve any kind of corrective action here, even though it appeared that Frank should not have been a candidate in that election?
Yeah, but if the board of directors or if the organization itself sent a letter to Frank saying that he meets the standard, he can run for an office, that should be good enough to hold weight.
No, yeah, I totally understand. It was clearly an oversight by the organization to allow him to run. But now that we know that he had a lapse in his membership that should have precluded him from being a candidate, what do you do? Nothing. Maybe nothing's the right answer. I'm not saying that my vote was the absolute correct vote. I get it that a lot of people disagree with me, but I took the idea that I'm going to sort of do what the bylaws require me to do. There's a way to correct that. Remove him, have another election with candidates who are sort of legal candidates. Another thing to think about is, and we came upon this last year, so before I was on the board, but before the Area 6, Area 8, and the presidential elections last year, the organization did some sort of a review of the eligible voters for these elections, for these upcoming elections. And they found that the voters had a similar requirement for a continuous membership in order to be eligible to vote. So in the voters' case, you had to be a continuous member for 1 year in order to vote in the election. But it turns out something like 10,000 members had a lapse in their membership. They renew a day later, 2 days later, a week later, something like that would preclude them from voting. So in order to correct that, the board at the time in June of 2023 changed the bylaws to allow up to a 60-day lapse in membership and still be eligible to vote in the 2023 elections. So that tells me that the board recognized that even a 1-day lapse in the membership is enough to not allow you to vote. And, if you take it one step further, then it would also be enough to not allow you to be a candidate. So those were the things that I was thinking about. Is it right or wrong? I don't know.
I guess I look at it in a sense of if this is something that was just brought up, because it looked like this was brought up on that first meeting out of it wasn't even something that was planned by the entire board. It was brought up by Donna. Shouldn't this have been something that was discussed at length as a board, or, hey, this is one of our meeting minutes that we need to discuss before we bring this up to the entire organization? That way everybody can have a conversation rather than just shotgun blast it and get it out everywhere. It should have been discussed. It should have been researched before a vote should have taken place. The first vote.
It was researched beforehand. So it was not the first time the board heard about that was not at that meeting. It was uncovered when they were vetting current candidates for the special elections for Area 3 and Area 1. I think it's the story I was told that's how it was uncovered. While they were vetting the candidates for these special elections, they decided to make sure all the current board members are in compliance with the requirements, so that checking their RO status and things like that, I guess. And that's when it was uncovered. So this was, sometime in early January, maybe. I'm not sure exactly what day it was, but probably early January. So there was a bit of discussion via email with the board, and then it was decided to put it on the agenda for the meeting because if the board was going to do anything about it, either ignore it or remove Frank, it had to be done at a meeting. The board can't take action outside of a meeting, so that it would have to be at the meeting. And the board can't meet and discuss things outside of official meetings. So we just can't do that. It's not allowed. The bylaws say if the board is going to meet, it has to be a meeting. There has to be an agenda. It has to be posted 10 days before the meeting. And those are just the requirements that the board has for any meeting that we have. So we had a special meeting recently to seat the Area 1 interim director. Again, that had to be called as a special meeting. The agenda had to be posted, and 48 hours notice had to be given to the membership about that meeting. So we do have requirements about the meetings, and we're not allowed to meet in private and discuss things outside of official meetings.
I would like to ask you about so you led the committee to to nominate interim directors for Area 1, Area 3. Could you explain the work you did finding a replacement, and then the ultimate recommendation to the board to bring back Bruce Wells and Sheridan Cornfield?
I do want to, I'll get to that, but I want to go back to the sort of Frank and Scott thing. Because I don't know if there's an idea out there that certain members of the board have an issue or an agenda against other members of the board. And I had absolutely nothing, no problem whatsoever with Scott or Frank. I actually went to Area 3 last year and worked for Scott at his match. So Area 3 match, he was the match director. I signed up as staff and I went there and worked his match. Frank asked me to work his level 2 match that he holds in Staten Island. I couldn't do it, because of some other prior commitment I had. But anyway, I didn't have a bad relationship with either one of them. And I don't like the idea that there's an agenda. There was an agenda to get rid of these two people. These are just the things that happened. So in December, the investigation about the leaks comes forward. We discuss it. And we take action on that. In January, the thing with Frank comes out. We discuss it and we vote on an action to take. I was voting on the actions that we were discussing and how those things play with the bylaws. It was not a personal decision in either case. And I just want people to know that I don't dislike Scott and I don't dislike Frank. I voted the way I thought I should vote as a fiduciary to this organization. Now, for your other question about the interim directors. So I reached out to the committee reached out to the section coordinators as required by the bylaws. We reached out to the section coordinators of Area 1 and Area 3. Area 3 has 6 or 7 sections, and Area 1 has a huge number of sections, something like 12 or 14 sections. So we reached out to all the section coordinators of both sections. We got their recommendations. Area 1 had a few different recommendations, so they weren't unified. Area 3, they were unified. They had one person that they wanted to recommend. So when the committee wrote up our recommendation, our initial recommendation that we sent to the board, it was for we had to choose one of the recommendations from Area 1 and the one from Area 3 they chose for us. There was only one person recommended. We didn't investigate anybody else. We put those nominations forward to the board. Now, a couple of days before the January meeting, a second person in Area 3 requested a petition to run in the special election. So now both special elections are going to be contested elections. So Area 3, originally it was only one candidate had requested a petition. It was going to be that person, and that was the same person who was recommended as the interim director. But now there's two people who have requested petitions in Area 3, and there were multiple people in Area 1 who had requested a petition. So now we have contested elections in both areas. So I talked to the other committee members I was a little bit concerned about how the board selecting a candidate or selecting an interim director, how is that going to affect the elections, the special elections that will take place in both of those areas. So it doesn't seem fair to me for the board to put one of the candidates in office early. So another thing that I thought about, and Leighton actually reminded me of this when we discussed it, and that is during the Area 8 election last year. So I was running, I'm a candidate in the Area 8 election. The Area 8 seat was open because at that point, Ted had been made president. So now there's no Area 8 director. And I made it known to the section coordinators in Area 8 that I'd like to be considered for the interim position. It turns out that nobody was selected for the interim position because they thought it would be unfair to select me because I was in the election. Or I suppose they could have, also selected my opponent in the election. But the idea was it would look unfair, so they didn't do it. So that also sort of weighed on my mind. It's not really fair for us to pick us, and I say us is either the board or the section coordinators, and all of that stuff has to be funneled through the board. So ultimately, it's the board's decision. I didn't think it was fair for the board to put one candidate over another in office sort of prior to the election. It seems to me that anybody who's put in office is going to have an advantage in the election. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but that's the way I looked at it. So I know Bruce and I know Sherwin. They both have vast experience on the board of directors and in USPSA. They've both been members longer than me. They've both been on the board of directors for a very long time. And I know they get a lot of sort of hatred online lately, but they both love USPSA. You're not a member of USPSA for 20, 25 years, and you don't spend 10, 15 years on the board if you don't love the organization and if you're not trying to do best by the organization. So I reached out to them. They both offered to do it. They said they do it. I thought, well, let's do that. It's 3 meetings at the most that these interim directors would attend. They had absolutely no interest in participating in the election. So I knew they weren't going to, request a petition. So that was it. That was my thought on that. It was not, somebody wrote into the board and said that this was, pre-planned, that we planned this all along, and it was absolutely not true. It was all triggered by a second person requesting a petition for Area 3 very late in the process. It was probably the Friday before our board meeting. So our board meeting's on Monday, and that person requested a petition, I believe, on the Friday before the meeting. So the discussions took place over the weekend, and then that's what we did during the meeting. It turns out that once the vitriol started online, that neither Sherwin nor Bruce thought it was a good idea, so they both eventually declined. We've now seated the Area 1 candidate that we originally proposed, and the Area 3 candidate, sort of interim director person, is kind of on hold now because of some question about whether or not the board can remove a sitting board member.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all that context. Really helps to see behind the scenes. Just some thoughts from me. And you asked me earlier, what do the protesters want? And this is kind of an amalgamation of, like, obviously there's bias here. The information that I'm getting, where I'm seeing it from, the people I'm talking to on the local level. And you told me, in your response, you want to be someone who upholds the bylaws. I agree. I want the organization to get to that point. But I think the issue right now is the level of trust in some of the membership in the board and the organization's like decision making. And it's really the optics of some of these decisions. So I completely understand why bringing Sherwin and Bruce on board made sense, because they were impartial, right? They weren't going to be running in the upcoming election, and they would enable continuity, right? They'd been board members before. They'd been there a long time. But honestly, to some of us, it just looked like some of the older board members are trying to consolidate a majority. That's honestly what it looked like to us, just from the outside looking in.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I get it.
And I, coming from my perspective, like if, having all that, feedback is great, but looking at section coordinators and people who are like, hey, this is who we want to be in as our interim director, kind of going with what that area wants. If that person is going to be representing their area and the area is asking for those people to be the interim, like from the outside looking in, it's like, hey, this is who they want. Yeah, I get it. There's going to be an election. It gives that person a leg up, maybe not. But this is who they're asking for. This is who the section in the area wants to have leading them on the board during this time. That's
I get it, Matt.
Perspective.
I totally understand. I get it. The only reply I'd say is, look, it was 3 meetings. We were not selecting a permanent replacement. So if Bruce Gary had resigned 2 weeks, 3 weeks later than he did, the board would have been selecting a sort of a permanent replacement for him to finish his term. In this case, we're selecting only an interim replacement. That the person would probably only attend 3 meetings, February, March, and April. By the May meeting, the special election would be done. A winner would have been determined, and that person would become the permanent replacement director to finish out the term. So yeah, I get it. That's the section coordinators had their choice. I just didn't think it was fair. I still don't necessarily think it's fair to put somebody who's going to be in the election to. It just doesn't seem fair to me. So I get it. People don't agree with that, and I totally understand.
It does make sense. I mean, that precedent to not nominate the interim director someone who's going to be running in the upcoming election, that affected you. So it makes sense logically to continue that for other areas. But going on, yeah, I mean, honestly, those of us from the outside looking in, it just looked like a power grab.
Yeah, I get it. And again, yeah. I'm sort of glad you guys invited me on here so that I can put this out there. Hopefully a few people understand it. It was not nefarious at all. Neither Bruce nor Sherwin had any inclination to be any kind of permanent director. They were both happy to be retired from the board, happy to be away from the anger and the hatred that we've all been getting. I don't think anybody likes that. So I thought those guys were. It was nice of them to volunteer to take it on for another couple of months, just in hopes that the election would be a little more fair. That's the only reason they were willing to do it.
Okay. Do you think there's a better way to communicate this level of transparency that we're getting from you? Do you think there's a better way to get that out to the membership? Do you think it's necessary at this point? Absolutely.
So I've been sort of thinking about this for quite a while, mostly because the social media crowd, the angry crowd right now, they control the narrative basically. So I don't know where you get all your information. I assume you get quite a bit of it from social media because the board doesn't put out much information. So now that the meetings are live streamed, you'll probably be able to get a little bit more information. I did mention the things that I mentioned tonight to you guys. I did mention during the board meeting. It was probably overwhelmed by a lot of the other stuff that was going on during that meeting. So I get it that if not everybody understood that. But when I joined the board, I joined the board as the Area 8 director. I don't want to be the spokesman for the organization. I didn't sign up for that job necessarily. It's not really a job I want. In conversations I had with Yeeman, both before and after he resumed office on January 1st. He wanted to do that. He's done it a couple of times. He's put out some messages. I hope he does a lot more of those things. I think the organization does need to put out more information to the members. I just didn't want to be the person to do it. I kind of reluctantly agreed to do this with you guys, only because of sort of the way this evolved with the conversation I had with you during email, Frank. But I honestly don't want to be the spokesman for the organization. There's all kinds of rules about what the board members are allowed to say. And I frankly don't want to take the risk that I'm going to say something that I shouldn't be saying, publicly.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, look at every White House administration. The press secretary is always taking on the face punches. So I don't blame you for not wanting to put yourself out there like that. Last question I got for you, and then Matt's going to ask you a little bit about multi-gun and some other things that do fall under the USPSA umbrella. So this summer, the USPSA is going to be holding as many as 5 elections for board member seats. The composition of that board is going to look different as we head into 2025. Do you see any potential friction points in this transition period? And how do you feel about how the board might handle those?
It's an interesting question, and the thing that I see as the biggest potential problem, and I don't want to overstate it, but after this year, so starting January 1, 2025, the board member with the longest tenure on the board will be Frank, and he'll have 2 years exactly on the board next January 1st. So we're losing a lot of the sort of institutional memory about why things were done. Why did we do this 10 years ago? Now, we can certainly reach out to these people. We can read old minutes and things like that. But we no longer have somebody like Sherwin or Bruce Gary on the board who have been around for 20 years, and they know immediately, why did we do this or why did we do that 10 years ago? We don't want to beat our heads against the same walls if we've tried this before. So I just hope we don't run into that situation where we have 5 brand new board members, essentially. Frank, who has 2 years, and Ben Barry and I will have, a year basically. So I think that could be a problem. I hope it's not a problem. We do have other employees of the organization who have a lot of that institutional knowledge, and hopefully they can supplement the board and help guide the board and not allow the board to make mistakes that were made in the past.
Yeah, well said. Matt?
So coming from the perspective that USPSA is traditionally not really given the time of day to multi-gun, and knowing that multi-gun is more closely tied to USPSA than Steel Challenge, what is your views on improving and creating a space for multi-gun within USPSA?
Well, first let me tell you, Matt.
I know you don't have much experience with multi-gun.
Yeah. I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm not the world's leading expert on multi-gun. Okay, I've shot one stage of multi-gun in my life, and I've RO'd a number of multi-gun matches. So I'm familiar with what the game is. I have not played the game very much. I actually think for the past couple of years, Matt, that USPSA has made some outreach into the multi-gun community to try and, sort of mold our rules into a better format, sort of a format that other multi-gunners want. So USPSA, we shoot 1 or 2 multi-gun matches a year, this organization. How many other multi-gun matches go on annually? A lot, I suppose, right? Mm-hmm. So USPSA we actually have reached out to the community to try to get, better aligned with what people who participate in multi-gun want as far as the rules go. So this is sort of a rules outreach that USPSA has been participating in, where we've made some changes over the past couple of years to make our USPSA multi-gun matches more inviting to the multi-gun community, right? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I am. Okay. And me, a couple other guys in the Southeast region, and Adam Maxwell, we're having conversations, and we're going to try and continue to have some conversations along those lines in order to see about revamping or realigning the rule sets. So I've been involved with it on a small scale, nothing big, just having conversations with Adam Maxwell. But that kind of goes into the next question of how can members who want to get involved help. You say that you have a multi-gun committee, and I know one of the committees is seated by the multi-gun committee is seated by 3 individuals, 2 who do not participate in multi-gun, and 1 individual that does, who's Adam Maxwell, and he largely represents the industry. What is your view on creating a direction that represents those members who want to participate and have no representation? We want to make this committee bigger for multi-gunners, naming people on that committee from different areas of the country that understand multi-gun.
I think there's going to be a push to have more members on these committees. So, look, if you want to be on the multi-gun committee, I'll be happy to put your name forward. You obviously know far more about multi-gun than I do. You're far more interested and involved in multi-gun than I am. I don't claim to be an expert in multi-gun. So I'm happy to put people forward who want to participate in that program, who want to try to grow the USPSA multi-gun program. So if that's what you want, I'll be happy to do it. I'll do that tonight if you want. I'll send your name forward to Yi Min and tell him that you're interested in being on this multi-gun committee.
Okay. Yeah. I'm game.
So, okay. Yeah. So I'll do that. So that's one thing. Now we do have a slots committee too. So there's a slots committee for the World Shoot. And I'm not on it, but Leighton was on it. And, that committee did quite a bit of work to try to find a way to, select members who would participate in the World Shoot, sort of the multi-gun teams, the rifle team, or, whatever other multi-gun disciplines, or whatever other disciplines multi-gun shooters would want to participate in on the World Shoot stage, right? So I'm not an expert in that committee, but I asked Leighton about it before this meeting so that I could give you some information. So they did. They met. They formed a committee of 8 people to select people for the World Shoot teams. They used various matches to make the selections. It was done on some sort of a competitive basis. So you had to submit results from certain matches. I think they tried to do a good job. I don't think they just tried to pick friends of friends to be World Shoot competitors. If you're on the multi-gun committee, I assume you may be talking with some of the same people who might be involved in the slots committee. If you want to be on both, I'll put your name forward for both. Again, I think we're trying to do a little. We're trying to do what we can do, but it's hard for multi-gun because we have so little to choose from as far as official USPSA matches. With handgun, there are so many matches. There's not a problem at all in selecting a World Shoot team based on some competitive outline. We propose these matches for handgun World Shoot selection. That's easy to do because there are so many handgun matches in USPSA. In multi-gun, there are very few USPSA matches. So it's going to be a bit more difficult. It's not going to be as black and white, who's going to win a slot. But I think they're doing the best they can. And if you have other desires or you want to have more input on it, I think they'd probably be willing to listen.
Well, I don't know necessarily who was chosen, but to go to represent the World Shoot team, I don't know, but I do know some of the people who weren't chosen. Specifically guys like on the AMU. John Whitell, who's arguably one of the best multi-gunners in the country, Houston Russell, even guys from our local area. Josh Cardenas, like these are guys who are significantly great competitors who have a track record. Guys like Josh Cardenas may not necessarily be known to the rest of the United States because he typically only competes in PCC or carry optics or other disciplines just on the pistol game. But like this guy, you put a gun in his hand and he's got a track record for greatness, and he's represented the Marine Corps and, the area well. Just seeing that some of these people that I've seen not get on there, it kind of makes you question, like, why aren't they on there? Especially like AMU guys. It's kind of like these guys are the best of the best in the country and have a track record of coming in first place in pretty much every match they go to, and they're not on that team. It makes you question things.
So what team are you specifically talking about now?
The Rifle World Shoot team.
Rifle World Shoot. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know any of the members who were part of the selection committee. I don't know what matches they used as criteria for selecting the people who were picked. I think from what Leighton told me, there will be more slots coming for the Rifle World Shoot team. So maybe some of the people that you're talking about that weren't selected, maybe they could be picked in this later selection process if there is such a thing.
So I think those later, and I could be completely wrong here. I think some of those are maybe for the individual slots to go just and participate as an individual competitor, where I think largely the team has already been chosen. I could be wrong. I don't know. That's for another day, I suppose. And kind of like my last question is, back in 2018, myself, along with some other members of the Marine Corps shooting team, created a direction to transition the Marine Corps pistol team from precision pistol to competing in USPSA. And since that time, large groups of Marines located around military bases around the United States have followed suit and competed in USPSA. And, the sport honestly has helped supplement training to increase lethality within the Marine Corps. From that perspective of being a military leader who has worked with section coordinators and match directors, it seems like a better direction could be to switch to PCSL or outlaw matches where the sport isn't overshadowed by so much drama. And I know we've kind of discussed a lot of that. Some of them is just people aren't going to be happy. People create drama, people live in drama. But what thoughts would you like to express to those who use this sport as a means for training?
Well, first, I think it's fantastic that the Marines are using USPSA. And, I know Tim Hychek, he's a good friend of mine. He went to Quantico and sort of turned around a sort of a failing USPSA club. And I enjoyed working with him. It's great to hear that you guys are using USPSA as actual training. It sort of validates the existence of the organization and the mission of the organization to, spread the gospel of practical shooting. Anyway, I think it's fantastic to hear that the Marines are using it and it's effective in improving your training. So that's great. Now, as you said, you sort of mentioned this, and I don't want to brush aside the all the criticism of USPSA, but when you talk about drama, in my mind, a lot of the drama exists in the online world. I don't spend a lot of time on at the online or in the online world. I spend most of my USPSA time is actually at matches. And I can tell you, Matt, not much has changed in the past, since I've been running a match in 2019. Almost nothing has changed from 2019 until today at the actual matches. Now, if you go online, you go on Instagram or you go on Facebook, you're probably going to find a lot of drama. I don't find a lot of drama at matches. I find almost no drama at matches. So part of me thinks, if you want drama, you go online and you'll find drama. If you want drama about USPSA, just go online and you'll find a lot of drama about USPSA. You'll probably find a lot of reasons not to participate in USPSA. Maybe you'll find reasons to run outlaw hit factor matches. Maybe you'll find reasons to run PCSL matches. And by the way, I have absolutely nothing against PCSL. USPSA has coexisted with other shooting organizations for as long as USPSA has existed. And we all coexist together in the shooting community. So there's plenty of room for, multiple different organizations to host shooting matches. But I don't see that the drama is overshadowing USPSA. I think the drama can be a big part of your USPSA experience if you allow it to be, if you participate in that online world quite a bit. But if you just spend a lot of time at matches, and I'm not trying to say you don't, but this is not you. When I say you, I'm not talking about you, Matt, or you, Frank. I'm generally speaking, if you go online, you're going to find drama, and you're going to find a lot of reasons probably not to like USPSA. If you go to matches, you're going to find an equal number of reasons to enjoy USPSA. So I said that during my election. I didn't do much campaigning during the Area 8 election. I did almost no campaigning. Even at my own match, I did not even campaign at my own match. We have a shooters meeting before every match. I didn't campaign at any of those shooters meetings. I didn't stand up and say, vote for me. This is what I'm going to do. Because I don't think people wanted the drama of the election to sort of interfere with the match. So people come to the matches to have fun, and I didn't want to insert any of the drama or the politics into the match. But what I said was, if you spend too much time on Instagram, you're probably going to think USPSA is about ready to die. But if you ignore Instagram and just go to matches, you're going to find all the reasons to love USPSA, why people do love USPSA. Why do people join USPSA and stay a member for 20 years? Why do they travel around the country participating in USPSA matches? It's for the community, the shared interest of, firearms and training, getting better, and the camaraderie that you get no matter what match you go to. The one thing I've learned traveling all over the country is those things are the same everywhere. The community is the same. The camaraderie is the same. The people enjoying the day shooting with a squad of 10 or 12 people, that's the same everywhere I go. Washington, Seattle, Arizona, Florida, New Hampshire, Tulsa. It's the same everywhere. So when you go to matches, it's just enjoyable. And lastly, I'll just say, look, USPSA is not the board. It's not headquarters. It's the 40,000 members that by and large put on every single match that is called a USPSA match. Headquarters puts on a few matches a year. Not many. The rest of the matches, the area 2, the level 2 and level 3 matches, the area matches, section matches, state championships, almost all of these matches are run by volunteers. They don't necessarily participate in the drama. They want to put on a good show for their customers, for the participants in the match, for the shooters. So I don't know what to tell you, Matt. I hope you choose to continue to run USPSA matches for the Marines, and that it helps. That's about it. I don't know what to tell you. If you want to switch,
I think people just want to collectively go out, shoot guns, and have fun. I think it just comes down to that.
Yeah,
I agree completely. Yeah.
When you say USPSA is the same everywhere, I just think about how every match, there's not a lot of drama because people are either beating themselves up for mics or no shoots. There's always an open shooter at the safe table taking apart their gun because it's not working. People are just way too internally focused on their own.
Wait, were you talking about me?
Oh,
I don't mean taking apart the gun. I mean the mics and the no shoots.
Oh, no.
I felt like that was a personal attack, Frank.
No. No, but honestly, most of the complaining you hear at matches is people like, I did this and I did this and
fuck this up, I fucked that up. This should have gone this way.
People, so not all negativity exists on social media. A lot of self-deprecating and self-hating goes on at the range too. But hey, Russ, we really enjoyed having you on. We appreciate your time. These were not easy topics to talk about, and I think the context that you provided for some of these recent decisions was really helpful in a lot of ways. I mean, we'll talk about this after we log off, but we would like to continue to have you on, pick your brain about everything you've experienced across USPSA, more of the current events, if you're willing to do so. But
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, absolutely. I'd be happy to come back on your show. I think this was a great format you guys have. I appreciate the way you guys approach this. I really appreciate that you you were sort of kind and gentle with me. The last thing I want is to go on a sort of a very adversarial podcast. So I get it that not everybody agrees with everything I've done. And I do agree that reasonable people can approach these things in different ways. So I don't, I'm not pretending that my way is the only way to approach these things, that my votes were the only ways to vote, the correct ways to vote. I get it. A lot of these things are kind of close calls, one way or the other. And I don't look at the other board members if they voted a different way. I don't look down upon them. I don't think they've done something wrong. I think they're voting the way they think they should vote in the best interest of the organization. So yeah, I do appreciate that you guys were real nice to me about this.
Yeah, absolutely. But if people do have concerns or they want to ask you a question, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
Okay, so my email address, my board email address there's two of them actually. One is probably easier to remember, area8@uspsa.org, or my name, russell.fortney@uspsa.org. Either one of them, reach me. And I do read, we've received, a few hundred emails recently, most of them not nice. But I do read them all. I've read every email that comes in. I don't always respond because a lot of times I think some of these people who are writing in are just fishing for a response that's going to be immediately posted. And I don't want to get into any kind of back and forth online with people. It's just not healthy. And I think it's kind of suits their agenda, and I don't want to feed into that agenda. But I am happy to answer, reasonable questions from people. And explain myself if I can.
Yeah, when I emailed you, you replied within the day, and then I saw you at Thermont that weekend, and I was like, dude, I don't want to believe. I'm going to reply to you. I don't want us to spend all our time on the range talking about this stuff.
Yeah, most of the emails that the board has received have been outside of Area 8, so I do try to respond to anybody from within Area 8. I don't want them to feel like they're writing just to an empty or a black hole and they don't get a response. So I do, in fact, just before I logged on to this podcast with you guys, I did respond to another Area 8 member who had written in about something. So if you're from Area 8 and you write into me, I do try to respond.
Yeah, definitely. But again, thank you for your time. I thought this was a very productive conversation. Looking forward to having more. To our listeners, sorry if this was a little USPSA specific. We did sprinkle in a little bit of multi-gun conversation. I think it was all very good content. A lot of stuff is going on within USPSA. It's going to be a very active election season coming up this summer. So we'll probably be doing some more of these just because. But let us know how we're doing. Let us know if you have any comments or opinions on this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.